Hello, welcome to this week's yoga session. This will be a well-balanced workout with an emphasis on playing a little bit and enjoying our practice. Take a moment to get set up. Draw the flesh out from the sit bones, rocking side to side. Draw the flesh back, tilt the pelvis forward, and see if you can kind of anchor yourself through the sit bones into the earth. And then from that foundation, draw up through the waist, the chest, the collarbones, broaden through the shoulder girdle, and then very delicately draw the shoulder blades together and down as you continue to lift and expand the chest. Close your eyes without squeezing the eyelids shut. Notice any pressure trapped between the eyelids or between the eyelid and the eyeball, or behind the eyeballs, and just releasing that pressure. Softening the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Allow the mouth to hang slightly open, releasing the bottom jaw, hanging slack-jawed. Let the bottom lip release and hang. Feel the cheeks grow heavy on the cheekbones. Slowly turn your attention to the breath, smoothing out the breath into a more fluid wave-like feeling. If the mind wanders, come back to the breath. Rising and falling as you breathe in and breathe out. And then begin gently, lazily releasing the neck and letting the head droop to one side or the other without stretching. Just letting it hang into the most subtle resistance. And rather than pushing deeper into that, just float on the surface of it as you continue relaxing. And then gently, slowly, lazily begin to move your head to different positions and repeat that same process of allowing the head to lean over just enough to make it interesting without stretching. Focus on the sensations you're creating and move those sensations around and through the neck and shoulders without straining. And then coming back to center. Okay. Now we'll allow the opposite shoulder to play a larger role in this. So as your head drops to the right, the left shoulder plays a significant role, and vice versa. So allow your head to fall to one side and take the opposite shoulder, lift it up, draw it back, and then just begin to experiment with drawing that shoulder down and back a little bit, or forward or up. And then without thinking, just moving that shoulder around as you let your head fall away. And again, not trying to create any big stretches. You can also rotate your head a little bit to the left or to the right. And as you do that, it will move the stretch into different areas, towards the front of the throat and towards the back of the neck as you rotate your head. So playing with the rotation of the neck and the movement of the opposite shoulder to increase the variety and complexity of the sensations you're creating. And then switching sides. When you find yourself thinking, redirect that energy into feeling. Noticing the most subtle sensations and movements. And then exploring those as you move those sensations around into different parts of the neck. Coming back to center. And then finishing with a head bobble. So we take the tip of the nose and we paint a infinity sign with the tip of the nose. And then we do it not mechanically, not rigidly, but in order to kind of get a bobble head going. Just letting the neck release, letting the head float. Adjust the movement, not to be perfect, but to help the neck release. So what starts off as an infinity sign may turn into a different movement that's more effective for you. And then roll out the shoulders. And then opening up the hips a little bit. So our hips tend to get very tight, especially in Westerners, because we sit in chairs a lot more time than we spend walking and standing. And when the hips tighten up, it can cause hip problems, but it can also cause knee problems and back problems as well. So, from this position, just experiment by leaning forward, not with your head, but with your navel. Lift and extend the navel forward. And if you start to pick up a little stretching in the outer thighs, hips, and buttocks, back away just enough that it disappears, and then come back into the stretch much more slowly and carefully. The more carefully you come into the stretch, the more likely the muscles won't panic. The more likely that the muscles will drop any defense mechanisms. And if that happens, the sensations you start to feel will be pleasant. On the other hand, if those muscles are still defending, protecting themselves, you'll feel stretching, straining sensations that don't feel pleasant. And if it happens, just keep backing off, relaxing, maybe even bouncing the knees to try and release that defense mechanism, and then more carefully coming back in and not going as deep, stopping a little sooner. For those of you that find this is too easy, walk both feet away from you a little bit, but try to keep your knees close to each other. Don't let your knees separate too much. Then once again, lift the navel and extend forward. You can lean to the left or to the right. You can back off and then lean in. You can activate the legs by pushing down and away with your heels, not moving the heels, but as if you were trying to push your sticky mat away from you. And when you do that correctly, you'll feel the sit bones pushing back and the heels pushing forward as if you're trying to stretch your sticky mat, and then leaning into the stretch as you're doing that. And you can alternate between that and active engagement and just relaxing everything and letting gravity take over. 5 or 6 more breaths. Just feeling your way around. Couple more breaths. And then coming back upright. And if you moved your heels forward, just bring them back in a little closer to you again. Opening with a twist, leading with the right shoulder. Lift the right shoulder, reach it around and back and down. Lift the chest forward and up. Cross the left hand over the right knee. Lift, expand, broaden, and rotate. Try to connect more deeply with the right shoulder blade. If you're having trouble finding the shoulder blade, bring the shoulder forward and backward, up and down, and the whole time try to feel what's going on in the upper left side of the back. Try and increase awareness, consciousness of that. And once you can feel that shoulder blade, then you can control it. Drawing the shoulder blade in and down, lifting the chest forward and up as you rotate. One more complete deep breath. And switching sides. Leading with the left shoulder, lift the shoulder, draw that shoulder around, reaching it back and down, chest forward and up. Crossing the right fingertips over the left knee. So much of the suffering we get as we age in our shoulders with ligaments, bursitis, tendinitis, all the joint problems, fascial problems, many of those, not catastrophic injury and not from being hit or something, but those repetitive strains that come on slowly and gradually over time. Most of those can be prevented or alleviated when we initiate movement from the shoulder blade. Typically, we initiate the movement with our hand. Our mind is thinking about where our hand is going, and the shoulder blade gets dragged along. And that results in a lot of different types of problems manifesting over 5, 10, 15 years. So instead, we want to think about the shoulder blade starting the movement, the hand following. And that requires paying more attention to the shoulder blade, shifting your center of consciousness from the hands into the shoulder blades more. Take another deep, complete breath. And coming back to center. Take note of which leg is in front. We'll reverse that in a few moments. So, remembering which leg you had in front, and then extending the legs and bounce and roll. Dandasana. Once again, draw the flesh back. Walk the sit bones back. Reach the heels away. Pull the toes back towards you. And then internally rotate the thighs just enough that the outside edge of your feet is vertical. And then spread the toes wide. And then activate the feet, as if you were doing Dandasana standing with your feet on the floor. Spreading the toes. And then without losing any of that, lift the chest up. Bring the navel forward and up. The chest forward and up. The shoulder blades back and down. Take a few breaths here. If you start to get tired and you find you can't maintain good posture, use your hands to support your weight. Or if your hamstrings are really tight, bend your knees to release that tightness and then continue to work with the lengthening the core. A couple more breaths. And then bounce out and roll the feet like windshield wipers, loosening and releasing any tension from the hips. I'm going to try that again. And this time, just come into it with 10% effort. Do everything we did before. Reach the sit bones back, reach the heels forward, tilt the pelvis, lift the chest, bring the navel forward and up, the chest forward and up, the shoulders back and down. But now let go of 90% of the effort without collapsing. You're still reaching the heels away, pulling the toes back, You're internally rotating the thighs slightly, spreading the toes nice and wide. The feet are active and dynamic. The chest is lifting, the shoulders roll back and down. So one of the common mistakes that a lot of new students make, and even experienced students, and that is that they focus on getting a good workout before they've got good technique. So what I want you to do is, don't put the cart before the horse. Ease up on the effort and work on the technique. Now when you get really good clean technique, then it feels really good to push into it, to work into it a little bit more. So when you start to get that urge, not your ego, not your intellect telling you should be working harder, but when you feel that organic urge to lean into the effort, go ahead and work a little bit more. A couple more breaths. And then bounce and roll. And with a lot of exercises, especially where we have sensory motor amnesia, where we have lost track of part of our body, it doesn't happen overnight. So you may spend weeks or months having to focus on the technique and not being able to work hard, just focusing on technique before you get the technique down, before everything starts to work right. Then begin to work harder. Let's cross our legs, but put the opposite foot in front. Once again, draw the flesh out from the sit bones, tilt forward a little bit, and then just notice if you're getting enough stretch in the hips. If you feel any strain in the knee, you can use your hands or you can use your forearms to hug your knees up and together as you lean forward to help take any strain out of the knee joint. If that doesn't work, experiment, and if you can't figure out how to get the sensation out of the knee joint, just take a few minutes to rest or try favorite pose on your own. And those of you that are doing okay can lean into it. Again, if you need more stretch, walk your feet away from you. Keep the knees close together. You can lean left, you can lean to the right. You can back off and you can lean in. You can push down and away with your feet and reach your sit bones back. And you can alternate between doing that and just relaxing. Five or six or seven or eight more breaths. Stretch the exhale. So a lot of these muscles in the hips are very, very strong muscles. And sometimes it takes a little longer for those muscles to relax. And if they get defensive, they're so strong that you can't overwhelm them with brute force. And if you try, you just get micro tears in the fascia and the tissue. So this is a matter of winning over the muscles, letting them trust you. As they trust you, even the biggest, strongest muscle will relax. And when it relaxes and you lean into it, it will create sensations that feel pleasant, even wonderful. 2 or 3 breaths. And then coming back up and extend, and then bounce and roll. And then bring your right heel in to the groin, and automatically your spine and your pelvis will angle directly between the angle of the two thighs. So if you look at where your left knee, your right knee is, 9 times out of 10, your navel is going to point right down the middle of that line. So if we start to stretch into the leg, we have to twist to do so, which is fine if that's our purpose, is twisting. But if we're trying to create a symmetrical stretch, we have to reposition. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do that from the upper body, so we do it from the legs. Keep your sit bones where they are, and just take your right foot, and without your hips moving, just move your right foot to the right a couple of inches. And then, without the hips moving, just pick up the left leg, and now you'll notice that your navel is lined up right down the center of that left leg, which is what we're looking for. So now we aren't twisting the spine from the sacrum all the way up through the shoulder blades. We're lined up with the extended leg. Now lift the chest and begin to lean forward with not the head, but with the navel. Those of you with tight hamstrings, remember, bend your knees so that you don't feel any sensation in the back of the knee. On the other hand, if with your legs straight, you're feeling the stretch in the belly of the muscle and it feels like a pleasant stretch, that's fine. Lift and lengthen the spine as you breathe in, especially the front, from the pubic bone to the sternum. And lean in on the exhale, 3 or 4 more breaths. Growing up, I hated stretching, and I was bewildered by the people that enjoyed it, because I assumed that they were enjoying that which I hated. Okay? And that was burning sensations, straining, a lot of effort, and a lot of discomfort. And it took me many years to realize that the reason they're enjoying it is that they're doing something very, very different than I'm doing. My body was tightening. The muscles that I was trying to stretch were protecting themselves, and then I was pulling on them. Whereas the people that were enjoying it, their muscles were releasing before they leaned into the stretch. Take a breath or two and then switch sides. Now, if you've been straining rather than stretching your whole life, those muscles have learnt to protect themselves and to not trust you, and regaining the trust of your body doesn't happen overnight. And so you may have to just be patient and give your body time to adjust to a more gentle approach. So draw the left heel in, and then keeping the sit bones where they are, move the left heel to the left, swing the right leg in front of you so that you're lined up. Lift, extend, and lean in. Again, bending the knee or straightening. And one side may be a little bit more comfortable or less comfortable with stretching. So don't worry about what you did on the first side. Make your own decision on the second side, whether or not to keep the knee bent a little bit or to extend more actively. And then breathing. Try to lengthen through the front, from the pubic bone to the sternum. And take 2 or 3 more breaths. Breathe deep. And remember not to push into the stretch until it starts to feel delicious, before it feels healthy and pleasant. And if that's not the case, you need to be more patient, back off, and let this be about learning how to relax and trust. And then coming up and switching out your legs. Straighten the left leg, bring the right heel in. Now this time we're going to add a twist. So instead of repositioning the legs, we're going to turn into the twist by lifting and turning to the right. Take the right hand behind, cross the left hand over the opposite knee, and then using your arms to help lift, so it's an upward spiral. Not just rotating to the right, but lifting the chest and rotating to the right. Again, the left knee can be bent enough that your sit bones are on the floor. If you are leaning back into the back part of the pelvis, bend your knee and shift your weight forward again into the sit bones. Now shift your weight over to the left sit bone. Just lean to the left a little bit until the weight comes out of the right hand, and then float the right arm overhead. Now bring your left shoulder towards the right knee, but lifting up, not down. And then with the extended arm overhead, with the right arm, begin to reach out at a slight angle over the left leg. So we're twisting as we lean into our stretch this time. There'll be a tendency to collapse the left side of the rib cage. So try to focus on keeping as much space between the left hip and the left shoulder or armpit. Lift the left armpit away from the left heel, even as you're leaning over. Then bringing that right shoulder back behind the ear. If you want, you can turn your head to look up, but try to look up in front of your arm, not behind. Now take 2 or 3 more breaths. Root down through the sit bones and lift up through the core. And twist. One more breath. Switching sides, come back to center. Extend the right leg, bring the left heel in. And then take the left shoulder blade, draw it back and down, cross the right hand, lift and rotate. Turning your head and breathing. Again, spiraling, lifting the chest up as you rotate. Now, shift your weight into that right sit bone, and if you have trouble doing that, bend the right knee until you can get that sit bone on the floor and root it. Then, float the left arm. And slowly begin to lean out over the right leg. Try not to collapse the right shoulder. Lift the right armpit as you extend. Take the left shoulder back. 4 or 5 breaths. Notice your attitude. If someone could hear your mind, would it sound like this? Or would it sound like that? And just back off enough that you aren't working, and then come back in just enough that you are. But there's a calm comfort to the effort. Take a breath or two. And then coming to cat-cow. On the inhale, lift the tailbone, drop the belly, open the chest, look up, finish the inhale. Tuck the tailbone, round low back, mid back, upper back, broaden the shoulders, tuck the chin, finish breathing out. Two or three more repetitions. Keep the hands in close to the knees, tuck the toes, lift the knees, standing forward bend. Either hands on the thighs, coming up a little bit and keeping the knees bent, or lean into a deeper stretch if you prefer. Breathe deep, stretch the exhale. Alternate sides, bend the left knee a little more and move the stretch into the right leg. And then bend the right knee, stretch the left, going side to side. Your goal should not be trying to touch your toes or the floor, get your head to your knee. All of those, that category of poses, are detrimental. Focus on the sensations you're creating. And let your goal be to create healthy, pleasant sensations in the legs. Take a couple more breaths. Coming back upright. Standing with your feet hip width, outer edges parallel. A little Vini Yoga Sun Salutation to warm up. Bring your hands to prayer position. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, float the chest. And then take your shoulders up and back slightly. Lift the chest forward and up. Breathe in. Reach the hips back, and then drop your hands to your thighs and catch yourself at the halfway point. Lift the tailbone just enough to get a stretch in the legs, and exhale. On the inhale, bend the knees, get the hips under you, and then straighten the legs as you float the arms overhead. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen. Lift the chest, shoulders back and down. Chest forward and up, and the abdomen firm. Now, on your own. On your next exhale, reach the hips back, release. On the inhale, roll up. And as you begin to feel your back loosening and releasing, you're welcome to go into a deeper forward bend. 5 or 10 repetitions, working with your own breathing. Couple more overhead stretches. On your next stretch, hold. Lift the left heel, flare the right ribs. Reach not with your hand, but with the ribs. And then lift the left heel, flare the right ribs, and then the right heel and the left ribs. Just go side to side. And then back to center, come back to prayer, and to Tadasana. So next we'll play with a way of stretching called dynamic stretching. And dynamic stretching has a bad reputation in yoga because it gets mixed up with ballistic stretching. And ballistic stretching and dynamic stretching look similar. The difference is the enthusiasm. When I am doing a ballistic stretch, I'm actually bouncing deeply into discomfort, and this teaches the fascia to tighten and the body to grip, And if you're a football player that's going to get hit by a 220-pound linebacker in the rib cage, that tightness can help prevent injury. But for the rest of us that aren't professional football players, that tightening of the fascia isn't a good thing. So dynamic bouncing, we bounce, but we don't bounce into pain, we bounce into pleasure. So we bounce into the range of motion. We find the edge of our range of motion, and then we bounce there, but it's much more delicate. So if you'll watch, I'm going to do the side stretch again. And now I'm just adding a little bounce. And then I'm experimenting with a bounce, not that increases range of motion, but that increases any pleasurable sensations. So give that a try. Float the arms overhead. Now with dynamic stretching, we have to be more conscious of maintaining the integrity of our core. So lift the pelvic floor, draw the abdomen in and lift the chest. Take the shoulders back and try and keep that core nice and firm, as if you'd had saran wrap wrapped around you real tight and then it had shrunk slightly. So just a firmness, not a gripping though, just a firmness. Lift the left heel, flare the right ribs, and then bounce a little bit. And then lift the right heel, flare the left ribs, and bounce. Come back to center. Now a little bit more core strength, and bounce the shoulders back, and bounce the chest forward and up. So the chest pops forward and up at the same time that the shoulders pop back. Now, keeping the abdomen firm while you're doing that's important so you don't hurt the low back. And then shake out. Roll out. Now a Qigong twist, but we'll do it with the arms extended, a little bit more dynamic. And if you'll watch, when I reach that end of motion, I'll just bounce into that a couple of times. Then I'll switch sides and bounce. So give this a try. Remember, you're trying to increase the pleasure, and then coming back to center. Dynamic stretching gets dangerous when we focus on trying to increase range of motion using dynamic bounce. Now watch, see if you can see the difference. And turn sideways first. So now, I'm kind of playing a little bit more. Yawning. Bouncing, but also I'm using a little more variety in the bouncing. Okay, so give that a try. Start with the dynamic twist. And then play with your elbows and with your shoulders and with your chest and your arms. You can even lift a heel off the ground or the other and then twist the other way. When you get really good at dynamic bouncing, it will start to trigger yawning, which is a good thing. Take a moment. Coming back to Tadasana, and then noticing how you feel. First physically, then the breath, and then your state of mind. "12-step sun salutation." Come to the very front of your mat. Make sure you got lots of space behind you. From prayer, sweep overhead, breathe in. Swan dive on the exhale, leading with the right foot, stepping way back, deep lunge. Hold your breath for just a moment as you step back into plank. Now, if you don't have the strength, come to your knees first and then press down. And if you can, press down from plank. Pull your chest forward, roll the shoulders back, take the weight out of the hands, press the tops of the feet down, reach your chest forward, roll the shoulders back. Find your shoulder blades, grip the spine and slide them down the back. and reach chest forward and up. One more breath. And then downward dog. Tuck the toes. Lift the hips, push back. Now, emphasize the shoulders and then the legs and go back and forth. So to emphasize the shoulders, we bend the knees. That way any tightness in the legs is minimized, and that allows us to focus on the arms and the shoulders. Root through the knuckle of the index finger, externally rotate the upper arm, hollow the inner armpits, pull the chest towards your feet, float the shoulder blades away from your feet, and reach the sit bones up and away from your fingers. Now dynamic bouncing if you want. Just bouncing the chest in towards your feet, but counter that by bouncing the inner armpits away from the feet at the same time. Now, ease up on the upper body and focus on the legs. Bend the left knee, reach the right heel towards the floor, lift the quadricep, the kneecap, and then switch sides. Bend the right knee, reach the left heel down, lift the shin, lift the kneecap, lift the quadricep up. Go side to side. And then try both legs at the same time. Reach the heels down, lift the quads and the kneecaps up. When you're ready, step the right foot all the way up for big lunge. Breathe in. Standing forward bend on the exhale. Overhead stretch. Breathe in. Back to neutral. One more time. Sweep up. Breathe in. Swan dive, breathing out. Leading with the left foot. Big lunge. Hold your breath for just a moment as you step the right leg back. Now from plank, press down, pull through into cobra. Pressing the feet down, chest forward and up. Draw the shoulder blades together, slide them down the back as the chest reaches up and away. Take a breath or two. Downward facing dog. Now this time we'll go back and forth between emphasizing the legs and the arms. Bend both knees and work on the upper body. Pull the chest through, float the inner armpits and shoulder blades away from the feet. And then shift your attention, ease up on the upper body and focus on reaching your heels down, lifting the quadriceps and kneecaps up. Go back and forth between the upper body and the legs. And if both movements and actions are intuitive and feel right to you, then do both at the same time. Take a breath. When you're ready, step the left foot through, big lunge, follow with the right. Overhead stretch. And back to prayer. Stepping your feet wide. Trikonasana, triangle pose. Turn the left foot out, right foot in. Spiral the left leg if you know how. Shift your hips to the right. Lengthen the low rib cage. Hand on thigh, shin or floor. Shoulders back, chest open. Extend the arm. Now add a little dynamic bouncing. First with the left leg straight, and then bounce, and then bend the left knee and straighten it, and then bounce the shoulders back, and then settle. into stillness. Couple more breaths. Stretching out the exhale. Switching sides. Turn the right foot out, turn the left foot in. Spread the toes. Shift your hips to the left, tilt the pelvis. Spiral the right leg if you remember how to do that. Right hand on thigh, shin, or floor. Shoulders are drawn back, chest is open. Float the left arm out if that's comfortable. And then just a delicate dynamic bounce. Remember, you're bouncing not into strain. So if you have an injury, dynamic balance is almost symbolic. Even if you're injured and do dynamic stretching, there's no pain, because that's part of the definition of dynamic stretching, is you're bouncing into pleasure. So just keep making the movement smaller, 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 and more gentle until it starts to feel nice. This is teaching the body to relax and to trust you with the practice. You can bounce the shoulders and the chest. Then settling into stillness. 2 or 3 more breaths. One more breath. Turning both feet pigeon-toed, and then hanging into a forward bend. Breathing deep, stretching the exhale. Coming down to the floor. Rolling up your blanket for back roll. Remember, the more you roll it up, the more intense this becomes. And if it's too intense, unroll the blanket. Start with the roller underneath the shoulders. Arms extended. Elbows bent or straight, or interlace your fingers at the base of your neck to support the weight of your head. Every 5 or 10 breaths, reposition by lifting the hips, pushing yourself over the roller an inch or 2, setting the hips down again. So that over the next 4 minutes, you'll work your way over the roller until the roller reaches the hips. In each new position, focus on breathing and relaxing.
3 minutes. If you finish early, just go back and start over. A couple more minutes. Five or 10 more breaths. If you've already finished, go back to a favorite spot. When you're finished, lift your hips, remove the roller, and then keeping your hips off the ground, try to lower your spine one vertebra at a time without the hips touching the floor. So the small of the back reaches the ground before the pelvis. And then just before the hips touch, lift one foot, bring that knee into your chest, grab it, pull it in a little bit, and then set the hips down and pull the other knee in. This is a little trick for creating more expansion in the back so we don't get any compression. Then rock side to side. Next we'll do bridge. If you prefer to do something stronger, plow or shoulder stand, or even a headstand, you're welcome to work on your own. Otherwise, bring your feet back to the floor, hip width, outer edges parallel. Anchor the big toe, flare the little toes wide. Now press the small of your back into the floor. Draw the navel down towards the spine and pull it up under the rib cage slightly. And if you're using a lot of effort, just ease up without letting go completely. Drawing the sides in ever so slightly. Then keeping that, lift the hips off the ground, and you can stop when your hips are just a few inches up and hold. If you have any contraindications for inversions, high blood pressure, headache, history of stroke, if you're pregnant, eaten recently, hiatal hernia, if you're on your period, any reason at all, just stay here. For those of you that are able to and wish to work a little bit more strongly, continue lifting up. And then if you want to, you can walk your feet in closer. Do it deliberately though. Shift your weight to one side until the foot gets light. Lift it, bring it in closer to you, and then shift your weight to that side. Lift the other foot, bring it in. And with your feet a little closer to you, continue lifting the hips. Now if you feel safe and you want to try adjusting the shoulders, slowly shift your chest to the right and pull the left shoulder under you more. You can think about taking your left elbow and trying to get it underneath your back a little bit. Then shift your weight onto the left shoulder, and with the right shoulder, kind of scoop that elbow under you, but really what you're doing is adjusting that shoulder. Then shift the weight back to both shoulders. Then if you want to, you can begin pushing with your feet, lifting your hips. Your hands can interlace behind your back, or can press into the floor, or you can grab your heels, or you can support and just touch your rib cage or your waist. this feels okay, push your feet away from you. Don't move them, just push through the feet in order to move your chest towards your chin and lift your hips towards the ceiling. 2 or 3 more breaths. Try to keep your knees evenly spaced as if you had a basketball between the knees. Keep some consciousness in the feet, rooting through the ball of the big toe, spreading the toes wide, lifting through the arches. Take another breath or 2. Breathe deeply. Experiment with a complete breath or complete back breath. When you're ready to come down, keep your hips as high as you can while lowering 1 vertebra at a time, like closing a zipper. And just before your hips touch the floor, hold. Shift your weight to one side until you can lift the opposite foot off the ground. Pull that knee into your chest and then set the small of your back on the floor. Pull the second knee in, hug both knees, rock side to side.
Coming to your hands and knees. And we'll do one more downward facing dog. This will be our last work for today's class. Now, if you feel like you need to work your abdominal core or your back muscles more, you can do cobra or ship with oars or boat. And if you want to use this last minute or 2 to work down dog, that's fine as well. (10 or 15 or 20 more breaths. Four or 5 more breaths. If you want to get a head start with pigeon pose, you can go ahead and transition a little earlier, bringing the right knee forward, sliding the left leg back. Whenever you come into pigeon pose, start with a gentle stretch, take a breath or 2, and then either back off or work a little deeper by repositioning the back leg. Move the left leg to the left and forward to ease up, walk it to the right and back further for a deeper stretch. Five or 6 more breaths on the first side. Take a breath or 2. Then switch sides.
Start with a gentle stretch, take a breath or two, relax, then work your way deeper. Five or 10 breaths. Two or three breaths.
When you're finished, come on to your back.
Do a dynamic twisting pose. Bring both knees to your chest. Glue your shoulders to the floor, so palms turn down, out horizontal. Keep both shoulder blades on the floor at all times. Swing your knees left, turn your head right. On the inhale, come to center. On the exhale, twist the opposite direction. Coming to center as you breathe in, twisting as you breathe out. If you keep the knees wider, it makes it easier. Touch the knees together the whole time, and it'll make it more challenging. Coming back to center, and then take a moment to pandiculate with your whole body, your fingers, your toes, your legs. And then when you're ready, take a few moments to get comfortable. Shoulder blades drawn together. Chest is open. The back of the neck is long. Knees bent or straight. If your low back feels vulnerable, to keep the knees bent. Breathing diaphragmatically. Relax the face, the jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders. Feet, ankles, calves, knees, and thighs. Loosen hips, relax the buttocks. The low back, the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders. The back of the neck, and soften the throat. Jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. eyeballs melting into the back of your head. The eyelids, the eyebrows, the forehead. The temples soft and hollow. The scalp and the crown. And let your consciousness float on the surface of the breath, rising as you breathe in, sinking and softening as you breathe out. Allowing the consciousness to rise and expand as you breathe in, sinking, softening, centering into your core as you breathe out. Slowly begin to breathe a little deeper, maybe even yawning and stretching. Rolling to one side and coming up to comfortable seated position. Draw the flesh out, reach the sit bones back, tilt the pelvis forward. I'd like to close with one of my favorite stories, and this is about an American businessman who's on vacation in a small sleepy fishing village in Mexico, and he sits on the beach and drinks
margaritas all day, and he's just watching, and he notices this one fisherman who goes out fishing every day, and some days he catches a few fish and comes back after half an hour. Some days he stays out all day before he comes back with a few fish. And after 3 or 4 days, the businessman approaches him, says, I've been watching you, and I was just wondering what your business model is. And the fisherman says, well, I go out, and when I catch enough fish for the day, I come back, and then my wife cooks them, and we have a wonderful lunch. And then I take a nap, and then in the evening, I like to make music with my friends, with my amigos. And the businessman says, I can help you. Says, trust me, I'm a businessman. People pay me thousands of dollars for my opinions and my advice. And he said, on the days you go out fishing and the fish are biting, that's the exact time you don't come back early. So instead of coming back early with 2 fish, that's when you stay out and you catch 50 or 100 fish. And then with a surplus, you sell them. It says, and then you keep that money, and over a few months, you'll be able to afford to hire someone and have 2 boats. And he keeps running this model until finally it's a fishing fleet, and then he says at this point you move to Mexico City and you start working with wholesaling, and eventually you have enough money to go to New York and you set up your fishing empire. And then he pauses and he says, and then after 30 or 40 years, this is the best part, he says, you retire a wealthy man and you move to Mexico and you live on the beach and you go fishing in the morning. You have a wonderful lunch. In the afternoons you take naps, and in the evening you make music with your friends. And so for me this is a metaphor for many different aspects of life. One of them is my yoga practice. Okay? So instead of doing a whole lot of yoga in order that at some future date I'll benefit from it, my focus is on doing a little bit of yoga whenever I feel like it, and enjoying the practice, not for some future benefit, but for the moment-by-moment experience of practicing yoga. And if you are able to do this, you fall in love with the yoga. And if you do that, there's a very good chance that 30 years from now, you'll still be practicing yoga, doing a little bit whenever you feel the urge or the need, and doing it throughout the day. So rather than doing 2 hours of yoga once a week, I might do a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, sometimes an hour in between, sometimes 2 hours. But if I do 2 hours of yoga, it's because I'm enjoying doing yoga. It's not because of some future goal or expectation. I'd like to thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Namaste.